Why do humans wear clothes? It seems like one of the easiest questions to answer. Most people would probably say, because it gets cold. It sounds reasonable. After all, when winter arrives, we instinctively reach for jackets, scarves, and warm sweaters. But what if that simple explanation isn't the real answer? What if the story of clothing is far more surprising than we ever imagined? For millions of years, our ancestors lived without shirts, pants, dresses, or shoes. Unlike today, they didn't have closets filled with different outfits or stores selling the latest fashions. They survived in a world where every day was a struggle against predators, harsh weather, hunger, and disease. Clothing, as we know it, simply didn't exist. Yet, somewhere along humanity's long journey, something changed. Early humans began covering their bodies with animal skins, woven fibers, and eventually carefully crafted garments. This wasn't just a change in appearance, it marked one of the most important technological breakthroughs in human history. Scientists have spent decades trying to answer a deceptively simple question: why did humans start wearing clothes in the first place? Surprisingly, the answer isn't written in ancient books or preserved in fossilized shirts. Instead, researchers have pieced together clues from archaeology, genetics, climate science, and even tiny parasites that have lived alongside humans for thousands of years. As we follow these clues, we'll discover that the real reason humans started wearing clothes may have had less to do with fashion and less to do with cold weather than most people think. Imagine waking up in a world where clothing doesn't exist. There are no shoes to protect your feet, no hats to shield you from the blazing sun, and no coats to keep you warm at night. Every step through the wilderness exposes your skin to sharp rocks, thorny bushes, biting insects, and unpredictable weather. This was the reality for our distant ancestors. Long before cities, farms, or written language, early humans lived much like other animals. They traveled in small groups, searching for food, fresh water, and safe places to sleep. Their days revolved around survival: hunting, gathering edible plants, avoiding dangerous predators, and caring for their families consumed nearly every waking moment. At first glance, living without clothing might seem impossible, but our ancestors were adapted to environments very different from the ones many people live in today. Early members of the human family evolved in warm regions of Africa, where heavy fur wasn't always an advantage. As temperatures rose and long-distance walking became more important, having less body hair actually helped the body release heat more efficiently. For countless generations, naked skin wasn't unusual, it was simply normal. There was no social expectation to cover the body because everyone looked the same. Clothing wasn't yet a symbol of culture, identity, or status. Those ideas would come much later. But if humans were surviving perfectly well without clothing, what changed? One of the biggest clues lies not in clothing itself, but in something humans no longer have: thick body fur. Compared with chimpanzees, gorillas, or most other mammals, humans are remarkably hairless. We still have millions of hair follicles, but our body hair is much finer and less insulating than the dense coats worn by our closest relatives. Scientists believe this transformation happened gradually over hundreds of thousands or even millions of years. But why would evolution remove something that seems so useful? One leading idea focuses on heat. As early humans became more active, walking and running long distances across open landscapes, overheating became a serious problem. Thick fur traps warmth close to the body. Losing much of that fur, combined with the ability to sweat efficiently, allowed humans to cool themselves during long pursuits under the hot African sun. This adaptation may have given our ancestors an important survival advantage. They could remain active for longer periods than many other animals during the hottest parts of the day. But evolution often involves trade-offs. Without thick fur, humans became increasingly exposed to cold nights, strong winds, heavy rain, and unfamiliar climates. What had once been an advantage in warm environments could become a disadvantage elsewhere. The loss of body hair didn't immediately create clothing, but it may have created the need for something that could eventually replace fur. For hundreds of thousands of years, human ancestors lived primarily in Africa. Then something extraordinary happened.
Groups of humans began expanding into entirely new environments. Some traveled into cooler highlands, others ventured into forests, grasslands, and eventually regions with freezing winters that would have been unimaginable to their ancestors. These journeys changed everything. Unlike tropical climates, colder regions presented new dangers. Nights became longer, winters grew harsher. Snow and icy winds could quickly turn a successful hunting trip into a deadly struggle for survival. Early humans were incredibly resourceful. They already understood how to make stone tools, control fire, and cooperate in groups. Faced with unfamiliar environments, they likely began experimenting with new ways to protect themselves. Animal hides offered one obvious solution. The skin of a hunted animal could provide warmth long after the meat had been eaten. At first, these hides may have been draped loosely over the shoulders or wrapped around the body. Over time, people probably learned how to scrape away fat, soften leather, and shape hides into more useful coverings. This wasn't fashion, it was technology. Just as a spear improved hunting or fire improved cooking, clothing became another invention that allowed humans to survive in places that would otherwise have been impossible to inhabit.
You might expect scientists to discover the history of clothing by uncovering ancient shirts or perfectly preserved jackets. The problem is that clothing doesn't usually survive for tens of thousands of years. Animal skins, leaves, and plant fibers decay quickly, leaving almost no trace behind. So how can researchers estimate when humans first began wearing clothes? The answer came from an unlikely source: lice. Humans are home to two closely related parasites, head lice and clothing lice. While head lice live among human hair, clothing lice spend much of their lives inside garments, crawling onto the skin only to feed. This difference turned out to be a scientific goldmine. By comparing the DNA of these two species, researchers estimated when clothing lice split from their head lice ancestors. Since clothing lice could not exist before humans regularly wore garments, this split provides a valuable clue about the history of clothing. Although the exact timing is still debated, many studies suggest that regular clothing use became common roughly 170,000 years ago, around a period when changing climates made survival increasingly challenging. Remarkably, one of the strongest pieces of evidence for the origins of clothing wasn't discovered in a cave or an archaeological dig. It was hiding in one of humanity's oldest and tiniest companions. By the time humans had begun spreading beyond Africa, the Earth itself was changing. Massive climate shifts transformed forests into open grasslands, glaciers expanded across continents, and temperatures dropped dramatically. These weren't changes that happened overnight, but over thousands of years, they reshaped the environments our ancestors called home. Imagine waking up each morning to freezing winds that cut through bare skin. Food became harder to find, winters lasted longer, and every hunting trip carried greater risks. In these conditions, staying warm wasn't just about comfort. It was often the difference between life and death. Scientists believed these colder climates placed enormous pressure on early humans to adapt. Fire helped, but a campfire couldn't travel with a hunting party or protect someone crossing a frozen landscape. Humans needed portable protection, something they could carry wherever they went. Animal hides were the obvious answer. A single large hide could shield the body from icy winds while trapping precious body heat. Over time, people likely discovered that properly prepared skins worked far better than freshly removed ones. Drying, scraping, stretching, and smoking hides made them softer, more durable, and easier to wear. This innovation opened new possibilities. Groups that mastered clothing could safely explore regions that had previously been too cold to survive in. Clothing wasn't simply helping humans endure the Ice Age, it was allowing them to expand into an entirely new world. Hunting wasn't just about food. Every successful hunt also offered valuable materials that could be transformed into tools, shelters, and eventually clothing. But wearing an animal's skin wasn't as simple as draping it over your shoulders. Fresh hides quickly became stiff, smelly, and brittle if left untreated. Early humans had to learn through trial and error how to preserve them. Archaeologists have discovered specialized stone tools with microscopic wear patterns that suggest they were used to scrape flesh and fat from hides. This careful cleaning prevented decay and prepared the skin for further treatment. Some groups likely stretched hides over wooden frames to dry evenly, while others may have softened them using animal brains, natural oils, or smoke from fires. These methods weren't written down in instruction manuals. They were passed from one generation to the next through observation and practice. Every improvement made clothing warmer, lighter, and more comfortable. Eventually, people probably began selecting different animals for different purposes. Thick furs provided insulation during harsh winters, while lighter skins were better suited for warmer climates. Knowledge of materials became another survival skill, just as important as hunting or making fire. Long before factories and textile mills, our ancestors were already developing one of humanity's earliest manufacturing processes. A loose hide could keep someone warm, but it also slipped, flapped in the wind, and made movement more difficult. As humans became more skilled, they started improving not just the material, but the design. One of the greatest inventions in clothing history was probably the sewing needle. Archaeologists have discovered carefully crafted bone needles dating back tens of thousands of years. Many even contain tiny eyes for threading fibers or animal sinew. These tools allowed people to stitch hides together, creating garments that actually fit the body instead of simply hanging from it. Tailored clothing offered enormous advantages. Sleeves protected the arms without restricting movement, leg coverings made walking through snow easier. Fitted boots insulated the feet while reducing the risk of injury from sharp rocks or frozen ground. Making these garments required remarkable patience. Hides had to be cut precisely, holes carefully pierced, and stitches pulled tight enough to hold everything together. The single outfit may have taken many days to complete. The emergence of sewing represents something profound. Humans were no longer just reacting to nature, they were designing solutions to overcome it. Clothing had evolved from a simple covering into carefully engineered survival equipment. Although cold weather played an important role in the story of clothing, scientists believe warmth wasn't the only reason humans covered their bodies. Think about the environments our ancestors encountered. Dense forests scratched exposed skin with branches and thorns. Deserts brought intense sunlight capable of causing painful burns. Marshes and grasslands were filled with insects whose bites spread disease and irritation. Simple coverings could reduce many of these dangers. Animal skins protected hunters crawling through thick vegetation. Wrapped feet made long journeys over rough terrain less painful. Head coverings shielded people from relentless sunlight during long hours outdoors. Even lightweight garments could discourage biting insects from reaching the skin. Some researchers suggest clothing may have also helped protect wounds, reducing the chance of infection while allowing people to continue hunting or gathering. In harsh environments, even a small cut could become life-threatening if left exposed. As clothing improved, it likely became more specialized. Different garments served different purposes depending on the season, the landscape, or the task at hand. The more scientists study early clothing, the clearer one idea becomes. Garments weren't created to solve a single problem. They addressed many challenges at once, making human beings more adaptable than almost any other species on Earth. It's easy to think of clothing as something ordinary. We wear it every day without giving it much thought. But viewed through the lens of history, clothing may rank among humanity's greatest inventions. Unlike sharp claws or thick fur, clothing wasn't part of the human body. It was a technology, one that could be improved, repaired, shared, and adapted. This gave humans an extraordinary advantage over other animals. Instead of waiting for evolution to solve environmental challenges over millions of years, people could invent solutions within a single lifetime. If a garment wasn't warm enough, they could add another layer. If boots wore out, they could make new ones. Knowledge spread through families and communities, allowing each generation to build upon the discoveries of the last. This ability to innovate transformed humanity's relationship with nature. Rather than being limited to one climate or one type of habitat, humans could modify their surroundings and themselves to survive almost anywhere. In many ways, clothing represents one of the earliest examples of technology extending human abilities. It wasn't merely about covering the body, it was about expanding the boundaries of where humans could live, travel, and thrive. And surprisingly, this was only the beginning of clothing's story. Soon, garments would evolve from tools of survival into powerful symbols of identity, culture, and civilization. And this leaves us with one final thought. What other everyday inventions are quietly preserving the untold story of humanity's past? Like and subscribe for more.